Well, hello everybody. This is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop. Let me just give one moment to raise the camera down a little bit. Much better. So, hope you guys enjoyed that little callback to the Season 3 intro of It Came From England, since I'm doing it in honor of this special occasion, which you guys can tell from the title. It Came From England has finally reached 100 episodes. I didn't even think it would make it past Season 1, but here we are, almost 5 years later. It Came From England being the 4th Character Workshop series to reach 100 episodes. And that is quite an accomplishment compared to other shows that have come and gone on the channel that have had more views than It Came From England, but somehow, some reason, It Came From England managed to outlive most shows for some reason. Which, like I said before, it's pretty surprising since the show had a pretty rough start during its first 2 seasons. It kind of, took a little while to get its footing in there alongside all of my other stuff, but by the time Season 3 rolled around and people started to really care about it, and, a lot of decent views on every episode, a couple likes per episode, I would arguably say Season 3 to 6 was It Came From England in its prime. And then, unfortunately, as a lot of stuff happens, Season 7 and 8 have unfortunately kind of gone back into its low point, I would say. In fact, I would arguably say a bit lower than Seasons 1 and 2 when it comes to viewership and just overall attention. But that's a topic for a whole nother day. Let's talk about the main topic of episode 100, which was voted by you guys when I did the poll a while back about what you guys wanted to see for episode 100. And the winner was the Beatles Yellow Submarine movie from 1968. So, without further ado, let's get started talking about it. The Beatles Yellow Submarine, or as it's simply titled Yellow Submarine, was a 1968 animated jukebox musical fantasy comedy adventure film which was inspired by the music of the Beatles. The film was directed by animation producer George Dunning and was produced by the 2 American companies, United Artists and King's Feature Syndicate. And funny thing about this movie is, since it's a Beatles movie, you would expect the Beatles themselves to voice their characters. Weirdly enough, it's not the case with this movie. They've actually been voiced by impersonators, voice actors, we'll say. And those voice actors being John Lennon being voiced by John Clive, Jeffrey Hughes, who voices Paul McCartney, and then Peter Batten, who voiced George Harrison for the first portion of the movie. However, according to the special features section of the home media releases of the movie, he only provided it for the first half of the movie, and, before he was able to finish recording the film, he was discovered by a deserter from the British Army in West Germany and was arrested. So, basically he fled the army to try and voice George in this movie, I guess. It's a crazy story that I honestly need to look into a bit more, but there's that. And then, in the second half of the movie, George Harrison was voiced by Paul Angelis, who also does the voice of Ringo Starr. And then there's several other characters that were made specifically for the movie that we'll get into as we go along. But that's just the basic behind-the-scenes stuff of how this movie came about. So, without further ado, let's just get started talking about the plot. So, the plot of this movie starts off in a fictional place called Pepperland, which is a cheerful, music-loving paradise under the sea. It was home to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Bands. And then the Yellow Submarine itself rests on top of an Aztec-like pyramid on a hill, and at the edge of the land is a range of high blue mountains. However, the land of Pepperland, that sounds a bit weird to say, falls under the surprise attack from the music-hating creatures known as the Blue Meanies, who live beyond the mountains. The attack starts with a music-proof glass globe that imprisons the members of Sgt. Pepper's band. And the Blue Meanies then fire projectiles and drop apples towards the fellow citizens of Pepperlands. And because of that, the residents become immobile as statues and basically drain all the color that's in Pepperland. And then during the last few minutes before his capture, the elderly Lord Mayor of the Pepperland, which is literally just called Lord High Mayor, sends old Fred to get help, and then the Apple Bonkers, which are some of the members of the Blue Meanies, bonk the mayor with several large apples, as Fred then takes off in the Yellow Submarine to look for help. Then he travels to Liverpool, England, where he follows a depressed Ringo around to a building on top of the hill, and Fred then persuades Ringo to help him return to Pepperland to save everybody. Ringo then collects everybody else, John, George, and Paul, and the four of them then decide to help out old Fred and journey with him back to Pepperland in the Yellow Submarine. And then in the Sea of Nothing, one of the few places in the whole sea that they've traveled to, they meet a weird creature by the name of Jeremy Hillary Boob, who is a short and studious creature. And basically how to describe him, his skin is like furry and brown, and he's got a blue face with big red lips. He's got really small eyes and has a little pink tail at the end. It's never really explained what he is. It's just kind of a nobody person in a nothing area, as they describe in the movie. And as the members prepare to leave, Ringo then feels a bit sorry for Jeremy and invites him to join them aboard the submarine. And then they arrive at the foothills of the headlands, where they accidentally are separated from the machine and old Fred himself. And then they eventually find themselves in the Sea of Holes, where Ringo picks up a hole and puts it in his pocket, which he says, "I got a hole in my pocket," which is a funny little pun there. Jeremy, however, while in the Sea of Holes, gets kidnapped by one of the Blue Meanies, and the group then eventually find their way to Pepperland. Afterwards, they reunite with old Fred and retrieve the apple-bonked Lord Mayor, and then they look upon Pepperland's now miserable gray landscape. The Beatles then dress up as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band themselves, and they steal some of the instruments, and then the four then rally to lance a rebellion. And then the Chief Blue Meanie himself retaliates by sending out the dreadful Flying Glove, to which John Lennon himself then defeats. Pepperland, after the band performs a song, gets restored to color and its residents come back, and the flowers of the land rebloom. Ringo then uses the hole that was in his pocket to release the actual members of the Sgt. Pepper band, and they join the Beatles in combating the Meanies' multi-headed dog. And then Ringo then rescues Jeremy, who was kidnapped by the Blue Meanies, who then performs some transformation magic on the Chief Blue Meanie, causing his nose to bloom roses, and then eventually the rest of his body then gets roses as well. And then the leader of the Blue Meanies, as well as the Blue Meanies overall, accept defeat. John, however, then extends an offer of friendship, and then the Chief Blue Meanie decides to have a change of heart and accepts. And then the movie then ends with the real Beatles themselves, who playfully show their souvenirs, George having the motor of the submarine, Paul having a little love, which is literally just the word love, just edited into there. And then Ringo having a half of a hole in his pocket, having apparently given the other half to Jeremy, according to him. And then Ringo then points out that John was looking through a telescope, which prompts Paul to ask what he sees. John then replies that saying that newer and bluer Meanies have been sighted in the theater, and then claims that there's only one way to go out: singing. And then the band then sings all together now, which, something I forgot to mention in the plot earlier, there was a scene when the band first traveled through the Yellow Submarine. That song played in there as well, and the song plays here again at the very end of the film. And during the short little reprise of the song, it ends with like translations of the song's title in various languages appearing in the screen before the credits, which I thought was a really nice touch and interesting way to end this very bizarre but yet beautifully made movie. And that was what the plot of the movie was like. And I gotta say, this movie was quite fantastic to watch. It definitely was one of the most visually appealing movies I've ever seen. This film was done in the late 60s, which, at the time, there was a huge spike in interest in psychedelic art, or just psychedelic anything in general, and this movie was basically a love letter to all that. And seeing that this was a Beatles movie after all, it made a lot of sense for a lot of their songs to appear in the movie. And there's about a total of, well, almost 20 songs that were shown in the movie. And I'm going to go through the list of all of them. Obviously, Yellow Submarine was in there, Eleanor Rigby, Love You Too, A Day in the Life, All Together Now, When I'm 64, Only a Northern Song, Nowhere Man, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Think of Yourself, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, With a Little Help from My Friends, All You Need Is Love, Baby You're a Rich Man, Hey Bulldog, and then, at last, It's All Too Much. Lots and lots of Beatles songs represented in this movie, and about a majority of them, I think, in my opinion, are really good. A majority of these songs I've never even heard of prior to watching this movie, and I gotta say, I've become more fascinated with the Beatles thanks to this movie, with a lot of these songs. My favorites being Yellow Submarine. Eleanor Rigby was a song I'm already familiar with before watching this movie, but I still love it. I also loved Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is another one of my favorites. I could go on and on. The songs in this movie are absolutely fantastic. This and the animation itself are definitely, in my opinion, the huge highlights for this movie. The plot itself, in my opinion, is kind of okay, I guess. I don't really have much else to say. It's a very simple heroes come to save the land from the bad guys kind of storyline. Like, that's probably the only weakest part of the movie, in my opinion, was the plots, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. The plot's there. I mean, it's gotta have a plot or else it wouldn't even be a movie, you know? It would have just been an animated concert. But yeah, all that aside, it's still an absolutely fantastic movie, and I gotta give props to the impersonators. They did a pretty good job voicing the main stars of the film themselves. And like I said, I do think it's really funny how the Beatles themselves didn't actually appear in the movie until the very end in the live action portion, where they are like, oh hey, there's these souvenirs I got back from our trip. And yeah, it was interesting. By the way, apparently I looked up, the film was made on a budget of £250,000. So £250,000. Not sure how much that would have been in US dollars, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. So yeah, just to get things short, I don't think I really have much else to say about this. The Beatles Yellow Submarine, absolutely fantastic movie. Great visuals, the music of the Beatles themselves really helps. Storyline's okay, the voice acting's pretty good. Not much else to say. Beatles Yellow Submarine, pretty good movie. If I was to give it a score, I usually don't give scores of everything I do on The Came from England except for the Doctor Who episodes I talk about. But if I was to give it a score, I would definitely give it maybe a 9.5 out of 10. Really, really solid movie. Definitely something you should go watch. And speaking of watching, time to talk a little bit about the home media portion of it. So, during the time in the 80s when home media started to flourish, Yellow Submarine was hopefully being able to be released on VHS and Laserdisc at the time. However, it was held up by the United Artists themselves for some years over some music rights issues, which is really weird because the Beatles themselves gave the rights to the music to be used. I don't know why that's a weird problem. And then coincided with the CD release of the soundtrack of the movie, MGM issued the film on home video in 1987. However, to the disappointment of the fans in the UK, the film is presented in the US theatrical version, which removed the Hey Bulldog portion of the movie. The video was then discontinued around 1990, and then for many years, the original VHS issue was considered a collectible. However, in September of 1999, MGM, who had the rights to the movie at the time, and of course, Apple, who also had the rights to the movie. Apple, by the way, is not the tech company that you all know about. It's a different kind of Apple. Then reissued the movie for the first time on DVD and VHS using restoration techniques at the time. The sound was remixed to Dolby 5.1, and the film was re-edited to its original European theatrical version with the Hey Bulldog number reinstated. which then this version went out of print once the rights were reverted back to Apple Corps. And then furthermore on the restoration, in 2012, Apple Corps announced that the film has been restored by hand for DVD and Blu-ray to be released in May of 2012, which would be May 29th in North America, but was later delayed 1 week till June 4th, which is June 5th in America. The company then stated that the film's soundtrack album will be reissued on a CD at the same time. The film has been restored in the 4K digital resolution for the first time, all done by hand, frame by frame, which is really interesting. Alright, and now with that being said, that's about it for this episode of The Came from England. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of The Came from England, or just mediocre plush content in general. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you get notified each time I upload a new episode of The Came from England or any of my other shows. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you think. That's about it. It's time for the Character Workshop. Signing out. Honestly, the future for A Came from England is very unknown, so I can't really say what's going to happen next time, because I don't know if there will be a next time. However, on the plus side, I do have a spin-off for A Came from England coming up. It's going to be about everything else in pop culture, American, Japanese, Canadian, etc. The thing about A Came from England is you are very limited to the amount of stuff that you can talk about and review, so since I want to talk about my thoughts on other pop culture things besides the stuff in the UK, I decided, well, I'll just do a show about everything else, titling it, It Came From Elsewhere. So, it's basically just going to be very similar to It Came From England, except I'm going to be talking about other stuff besides stuff that came in the UK. So, yeah, that'll be coming out very shortly. I don't know when, I don't know what I'll be talking about, but we'll see what happens. So with that being said, thank you everybody for 100 episodes, and if A Came from England has a future, I will see you next time, but if not, it was a pleasure knowing you guys.